We're going to try to keep this short and sweet. This was a very exciting week with a lot of information. I wanted to report back to you and let you know what people at the FSBA are talking about, what school board members are talking about, and what's going on. What's been a pretty eventful week, right? Because this has been a big transition. There's a lot of new school board members that are now taking their seats or recently taken their seats. Including two in our own county, two new school board members, right? So there's a lot of buzz, especially because our governor got involved in some of these races, and this was a real contentious election cycle. And so I'm gonna get into that. If you permit me, I'm gonna say a little prayer before I begin, and then we're gonna get right down to business, and we're gonna talk about a bunch of different stuff. So join me if you will. Lord God, I sit before you an extremely grateful man. I know that there's people around the world, especially in China and Iran right now, who can only dream about doing what I'm about to do, which is to just speak my mind on government and politicians and elected officials and public officials, and not worry about losing my family or my community or my country or my freedom. And I'm just truly grateful for that blessing, knowing that I have those things because my parents did not, and they came here specifically to provide me with that. And I swear I will always make it useful and take advantage of it and make sure that I can speak my mind and never give up that right that they were not born with, because they were not born in the United States. So Lord, I pray for those people in China and Iran, that they one day know the freedom that I enjoy here in the United States. And I also pray that all of my brethren here in the United States, all my fellow Americans, appreciate their ability to speak their minds, to address their government, and all of their God-given rights, the rights that are provided to them in our Constitution, and the freedom to be able to raise their family using their beliefs, not the government's handed down beliefs. So thank you, Lord, in your Son's name, Jesus Christ. Amen. So thank you very much for permitting me that moment. I wanted to talk about this buzz that's been going on at the FSBA. A lot of new school board members, as I mentioned. I made contact with several of them, with our friends in Polk and our friends in Orange and other counties where they elected new conservative school board members. I thought that was important to let them know that, hey, I'm glad you got there. I'm glad that you made it, and so on. Unfortunately, I couldn't do that with members of my own county. We did not elect any conservative school board members in Osceola County. But I'm glad that I did connect with other conservatives throughout the states who care more about academic performance from their school boards than they do about indoctrinating kids. I could not find, I won't mention it, I'm going to talk about local stuff at the end, but I could not find another situation where the official, let's say the highest official, elected official in the county, interfered as much as they did in Osceola County to prevent, a conservative nonetheless, to prevent school board members from being elected. For example, our state rep, Fred Hawkins, I can't find another case where the conservative or a Republican state rep interfered in their school board races to the detriment of conservative school board candidates, right? Like, we know we had 3 candidates that were endorsed by Moms for Liberty. We did not get an endorsement by them or by the 1776 organization or anyone based on the interference of our state representative, Fred Hawkins. And I couldn't find another situation where they had something similar than that. So that was surprising. I thought maybe, hey, this is directive from the state, but no, that happened in Osceola County, and that battle for the most part was internal, not an external thing. And so I wanted to mention that before I move on to everything else. Okay, FSBA. So the first time I got to the FSBA, it was a very different feeling, right? Very different feeling. In fact, the feeling that I had was that we, let me say this. So I went to different sessions, right? And at these sessions, I realized that, sorry, I'm just checking to see if this is live. I'm hoping that it's going. So, anyways, these sessions, 2 years ago, when I would go to these sessions, people would it was ripe with comment, right? Like everyone, there's a lot of people that had comments, and 9 out of 10 times, the comments were basically, how do we enforce the control that we have over school districts? How do we impose our views? And most of these views were basically liberal views. It was basically, how do we get everyone to play their part? How do we get everyone to play their part in the system that we have at this time, right? Basically, the stranglehold that the left had on our school districts. And that really is not an accurate statement, because by and large, we had a lot of conservatives in school board positions at that time. But the large ones, by and large, the larger the district, the more left-leaning the board makeup was. Excuse me. And what that meant was that everyone felt very emboldened to kind of address their needs out loud. We hate these being questioned by parents. We don't want parents coming in. It was a lot of that. And I remember 2 years ago being surprised. And when I say 9 out of 10s, in the situations where there was a conservative that would stand up and actually address the issues, and at that point, I think the first time I came, the biggest issue was school choice, right? The second biggest issue was parental rights. And it wasn't even called parental rights back then, 2 years ago, because that's a movement that started taking place maybe a year in, right? Like a year ago. But it was really just, it was parental rights without the name parental rights. And people didn't really understand how to address it. Parents were starting to come and talk about these issues, and the nomenclature didn't really kick off yet at that point. So it's completely different this time. There was a lot of comments, but the comments were more about function, right? They were more about how we do a good job. It was a very different environment from 2 years ago, when everything was like, we don't want school choice, take their money. It was like the people who were most emboldened were to the left, and you could tell in the comments, and there were very strong comments, and it was not the most positive environment if you were a conservative or you believed in parental rights and so on. Okay, so let me talk about this. Let me check again here, because I don't know if we're live. I thought that we were live, but it doesn't look. So maybe you guys are saying something that I'm not, but for some reason it looks like maybe it did not go live. Maybe we are. I don't know. It's not showing me that. So let me see. Hopefully I don't have to start all over. No, I'm fine. Okay, whatever. We're gonna keep going. Nope. Ooh, we're not here. So permit me the technical difficulty here. Normally there's a little ring around your profile picture that says live, and I'm not seeing that, so I'm concerned. I'm using Restream right now, and which is a new software, and hopefully that's working. Okay, I think it is. So anyways, 25 out of 30 DeSantis endorsed candidates won, right? More than half of Moms for Liberty and the 1776 Project in candidates won. As many as 70% for 1776. And why is that a big issue? It's a big issue because we really had a lot of different issues. It's not just about the culture of the FSBA that changed, and it really has changed. I think that before it was all accepted. Education is a world where the left dominates and no one else can really say anything. Everybody felt very comfortable speaking left and being left and having leftist questions and so on. And now that's not the case. Now you have a very balanced kind of approach. Like everybody's kind of walking on eggshells. Like, we don't want to talk about politics. Thank you very much, Elaine. I appreciate that. We don't want to talk about politics because we don't know where these people stand, right? Now, I'm completely the opposite of that kind of frame of mind. I'm like, let's talk politics Because once we can talk politics and we get out of the way, we can move into the important things of student academics and whatever, right? In education, especially, probably more than any other situation in the world, politics should not be involved from a left-right perspective, right? That was a mistake that we surrendered education to the political world. It never should have been there to begin with, because so many times the important things in education have nothing to do with left or right. They have everything to do with the success of our kids. And either the kids are succeeding or they are not, right? So there were big issues. I'm going to talk about these really quickly. Parental rights was... There was a session on parental rights, but it wasn't as nearly brought up as much. It wasn't as much of a focus as it was last year. Last year, I came in and I was really, like, every session that I went to, I was like, parental rights, parental rights, parental rights. Tell me about parental rights. Tell me about parental rights. What does that look like? What is that going to look like? Because all the legislation was new. And parental rights today was very eerily silent. It really wasn't brought up. What the biggest issue at this conference, at the FSBA conference for 2022 right now, was school safety. Now, that's a good thing. I'm not saying that that's a bad thing. It's a good thing. And the school safety issue, though, was about SRO and guardians and that discussion. Manny Diaz was here, the Commissioner of Education was here, and he spoke during a luncheon today, and he was saying that he was hoping that the Guardian program would be at every single district in the state of Florida. Now, so I disagree with that, right? For me, there's nothing better than having an actual law enforcement officer in the schools. But if I understand correctly, Commissioner Diaz wasn't saying that we needed to replace SROs at all of our schools with a Guardian program. He was basically kind of like, we need to have both type of thing. At least that was my impression, right? So based on that understanding, I would completely agree. An SRO Guardian hybrid would be best, because an SRO and a Guardian at the schools would be great. I also have other ideas about that too. You should, as a school employee, in my opinion, this is going to be controversial, but I'm going to say it anyways. As a school employee, based on the fact that you pass a very high level criteria of background, right? Of background checks and whatever else, however else, until everybody feels comfortable with it, be allowed to be armed on campus. And here's why. You can have an SRO on campus, but that's one person, right? You can have guardians on campus. Now you have two people who are armed on campus. That's good. That's great. And if that's the issue, great. Right now, when you have an SRO on campus, you have one armed person on campus, right? We have 3,000 kids sometimes. And for me, I know this for a fact. I'm not going to debate it with anybody. I know for a fact. If I'm in a room, myself personally, with a gun, everyone else in that room is safer. And I can guarantee everyone that situation. You're not less safe with me in a room with a gun than you are with no one with a gun. There's no room, right? First of all, just on a basic level, I've been in gunfights. I know what it's like to fire a weapon many times over. I know what it's like to engage an enemy in combat. Everyone who's with me is safer in a room with me armed than they are without, right? That's just point blank. Now, if you take that to like very heavily well-trained individuals, veterans, especially because now we're bringing in veterans to the classroom, right? We are bringing in veterans to become teachers. And there's not going to be many people that are more apt to be able to wield a weapon to save their students or to protect their students than a veteran, right? Police officers and veterans, you can't have a better scenario. So if we're bringing all these veterans into campus, why are we not basically doing like a force multiplier and making sure that we're using that advantage that they've created to create more teachers and also make our schools safer? That's just opinion, kind of like an offshoot of the discussion. If we're talking about school safety, I think that's why anybody who's a veteran or not even a veteran, somebody who's trained, let's say a professional or a competitive shooter or somebody who's been hunting their entire life, few people know more about treating a gun safely than people who are hunters, right? And so if you've been hunting your entire life, I feel confident with you having a gun to protect my child in their classroom. And I would be okay with that. I know that a lot of people wouldn't, but I'm just saying that's just me. Now, Another thing, they've already been talking about legislation to address social media safety. That to me is great because I'll tell you what, the biggest problem that we have in schools, in my opinion, right now, the source of all of the so many problems is this right here. This is the biggest problem. It's the phone. The phone is the biggest problem that we have in schools, in my opinion. It's basically what causes a ton of distractions, a ton of disrespect. The basis, the foundation is right here. And if I were to say one app, I know it's not just one app, right? I know that Instagram, Facebook, everything can be just as bad. But if I can say one app, TikTok, if you're a parent and you're watching this show tonight, make sure that you take TikTok off of your kids' phones. Don't allow them to use TikTok if you can prevent it at all. TikTok is an absolutely dangerous app for your kids. It's as dangerous as the pornography that parents are complaining about. It's as dangerous as anything that's out there. It absolutely removes a path to productivity for your child. It's just, there's nothing good about it. And in fact, TikTok in China, as you see, I shared a video earlier, a news story earlier about TikTok, that the product that they have, TikTok in China, is not the same. Number one, it cuts off after a certain number of time a kid spends on it. Number two, if you're under 13 or 14 years old, it's mostly educational content that they're getting. But for our kids, what they're sending is digital trash, right? So they send us all this digital trash, and then our kids are they basically, it's a opium, it's opium for the mind is what it is. And if you can, parents, take that out of the whole equation. So social media, that's something that was discussed. And then Baker Acts, the act of Baker acting a student in some way. Those things were all brought up today. And now something else I really want to talk, assessor complaints. Now, assessor complaints are basically when something at school happens and it rises to the level of assessor reporting mandated circumstance. Let's say a fight with injury, a sexual assault, something like that. It rises to the level of assessor complaint, which means that it goes to the state, right? You report it and it goes to the state. Excuse me, my mouth is getting dry. I'm speaking a little bit fast because I know I have 1 hour on Restream. I'm trying to get all of this stuff in there. So we're at 8 minutes and 42 seconds. So these assessor complaints are something that we've talked about in Osceola County many times. I don't know if it's been talked about around the state. Obviously, it has been because they're talking about it here at the FSBA. But in my opinion, our county doesn't do a good job at making a true assessor reporting effort. And I'll tell you why. Assessor does not look good. Assessor situation does not look good. If you have assessor reporting up and down every day at your district, right? Like imagine if every fight that happened in one of our schools had to be assessor issue, then we would be sending them like a ton, right? We would be sending them a ton of reports, assessor reports, and we don't report them all. And so we've had issues. I don't believe that Osceola County does a great job at reporting all of our assessor complaints. I've heard issues where there's even administrators saying, "Hey, you pretend that never happened," and it's a very strong suggestion, an order, in fact, saying, "Don't that didn't happen. That didn't happen. That didn't happen." So I first of all, if you're an administrator in Osceola County, please never do that. Never feel like you can't send up assessor report. I don't care what the superintendent says. If the superintendent tells you to do it, you please call me, and you tell all your school board members, because that's their responsibility. And if they don't do that, right? If they don't report that, make that assessor report, then not only does the state, and I don't care that much about the state knowing or whatever, I'm not that big a deal about that, but the community needs to know. The community needs to know what's happening in our schools. And it needs to be known so that we can protect our teachers and our students, right? And so that's the biggest thing. So it's not a joke. This is not about somebody's career. This is about performance. And so many things I'm going to talk about tonight are really performance-based. Okay, the next thing. There were so many classes that I thought were great. And I don't know. Am I frozen? I don't know. It's frozen over here, guys. Let me know if it's frozen to you. Hopefully it's not. So there were some great classes that I didn't get to go to, some that maybe that were not, risk management. Some of them were interesting on an intellectual level, but they didn't really this is not, you have risk management, experts. I wouldn't say that that's the most important thing. Now, these classes may have been great. I didn't go to all of them. I went to as many as I could. I went to the ones that were more pertinent to my county. But here's the thing: even if the classes are not phenomenal, or they were phenomenal, but they weren't really related to the job of a school board member, they did a great job of offerings, right? The FSBA did. I will say this: they had one that was on recruiting, hiring, and training and retaining staff members, build your successful leadership pipeline. I went to that one. It was great. I'm going to talk about that one. There was one that was put on coincidentally by our superintendent and our school board member, Teresa Castillo, and I'm going to talk about that as well. I wouldn't have given that a 5-star rating, but I'm going to tell you why. But there were some good ones: SRO roles and responsibilities, and so on. So, really, in my opinion, this is just my opinion, if you're going to have an FSBA conference, right, the classes that you should be giving these new school board members, number one class, right, and everybody should take it. And they have a new school board member academy. They had some classes. Obviously, I didn't go to those, but I did not go. I was not offered that class when I first became a new school board member, so I don't know. I did see it on the agenda for new school board members, though, and it's basically what the statute says your job is. That's the number one thing. They need to learn. These school board members need to learn that your job as a school board member, right, is not to protect the district. That's not your job. It's not your statutory job. Your job is oversight. You're supposed to be overseeing the school district. You're not supposed to be protecting the school district. That's not your job, right? Your job is to make sure that the people who work at the school district are being treated well, that the students that are there are learning what they're supposed to be learning, that the employees who work there are not miserable. You're supposed to be protecting the community. That's who you're serving. I hate the fact that it needs to be said, but that's who you serve. And that's not, every school board member doesn't really understand that. They think that it is you're here to protect the superintendent, you're here to protect the people that work there, and you're here to well, yeah, you're supposed to be protecting the people that work there, but their conditions, you're supposed to be making sure that everybody has the right conditions. You're not supposed to be protecting careers. That's not your job. Your job is to be protecting the community from career people who take control over an environment and necessarily don't return the best results. So that's what your responsibility is. I know not everybody believes that, but that's my opinion. The statute gives you 25 duties and responsibilities, and I think that every school board member should be schooled on that. You should know exactly what your role is, because there was a class like that when I first became a school board member, and the class said that I remember, the one thing I remember was that, oh, well, these are your job is not to do this, your job is not to do this, your job is not to do this. That's not helpful. Tell me what my job is so that I can do my job well, right? That's far more helpful. Also, it was very superintendent heavy, right? Like they were telling you, oh, you defer to the superintendent on this and whatever. And that's because superintendents control the school districts, right? By and large, when you have a left-leaning school board and you have the left-leaning superintendent, right, then the superintendent's going to control everything. And, there's a school of thought. This is going to be another controversial statement. I know that educators are going to hate this. But I don't think that superintendents should necessarily be educators, right? And I'm going to tell you why this. I know that some teachers are going to get mad for me saying that, but here's why I say that. When you're an educator, right? Like, let's say me, I was a former journalist, right? So if you make me the king of all journalists everywhere, and every time there's a problem, when I look at it, I'm going to be using my anecdotal knowledge to impose my view of me and what my experience was on everyone. It's not always helpful, right? Sometimes it's better to have I was going to say an accountant. That might not be a bad example, but sometimes it's better to have let's say, for example, I'm a journalist, and if I'm going to create a set of rules for journalists, then I might like to have a doctor or somebody who's completely unrelated to that process come up with the rules. And then what you do is you provide them, like you have that doctor, if he's going to make up the rules, and this is just for example, they're going to have an advisor who is a journalist, they're going to have an advisor who's a writer, they're going to have all these advisors around them that are telling him that. And the value of that is that now you're forced to create a blank mind, and you're supposed to have an open mind, and then you take intake all that information. And that's important because it basically robs you of experience. Now, here's the thing. I have been teaching, right? I'm teaching now. And so I can tell you that, is that perspective helpful to being a better school board member? Absolutely it is. Is it helpful? Absolutely. Does it make me a better school board member? Potentially. That's the whole reason I did it. The whole reason I'm doing it is for that. But does it make me more effective of a school board member? Maybe not. And here's why. Because I have not changed any of my views, right, or my opinions on the process. What I've changed is that now I'm like now I can show you the scars, right? So it's more helpful in the sense that a teacher knows now I'm in there. I'm teaching one of the most difficult grades, middle school. I'm teaching a pretty difficult class in the sense that the interest that it commands from the students at this point in their development, which is civics, right? And I also am in a very difficult environment in the sense that I don't have my own classroom, and there's all kinds of struggles in me being thrown into like a class environment situation and not knowing anything, right? And not knowing anything in terms of not having any teaching experience. And so it makes me a better teacher because now the teachers can see that, listen, he did it. Now he knows you were a teacher. Did you do the ELL and the ESE forms? And did you do the reports? And did you do all the grading? And did you do this? Did you do the lesson plan? Did you do the... And I say, yes. I did all those things, right? I'm doing all those things. Did you talk to the parent? Yes, I talked to parents. I know what it's like for me to talk to a parent and say, listen, little Johnny did X, Y, Z. And then the parent tells me, oh, well, what did you do wrong instead? And I'm like, me? I'm a 47-year-old man. I'm not here to... You're not my parent. Worry about your kid, So I experience those things now with teachers, and I think it's helpful in the sense that I can say that. Now, when a teacher comes and tells me that, intellectually I understand it so that I can advocate on your behalf without having experienced it. But at least it gives me credibility. You guys know that I do it, that I love you enough to take the time and go and teach and put my heart and soul into that because it gives you a perspective, right? Absolutely. So... I think that's important. So that brings me to teacher retention, recruitment and retention. I went to a class that was teacher recruitment and retention. I thought that was really important. There's more than 8,000 vacancies throughout the state of Florida, teaching vacancies. Now, I want to say this. There are some counties that are doing much better than we are, not just in number, but in ratio in comparison. Excuse me, and I'll tell you why. Polk County, for example. Polk County has a larger district, they have a larger budget, they have more students, they have more schools. It's a larger system. They have 136 vacancies. Osceola County, the last I checked, the last I saw, there was more than 220. So 223 to be exact, the last time I saw it, that was put out by the union. And I remember it because 223 is a lucky number for me, right? So, although that's not such a lucky number in that particular case. So why do we have almost 100 more openings when we have such a smaller demand than the next county over? Why? And I'll tell you, I can tell you why because of my experience, right? Now, there are some of the people who are involved, as the only conservative on the school board, I'm the one that gets harassed by others that are not and so on and whatever. And there's some guy who's always talking about my fingerprints and you didn't get your fingerprint. I'm in the classroom. That tells you everything that you need to know, right? Now teachers know that that's a lot of BS because if I'm in the classroom, I went through the process to be able to be approved to be in a classroom, right? So you already know. But here's the thing. I got my fingerprints back from my applying for a job in Polk County faster than I got my fingerprints in Osceola County, the return. So Osceola County was playing games. I know that the district does not like me. They don't like the fact that I've exposed them for some of the things that they do. So they play games with the fingerprints and whatever, and they make it all impossible for me to be approved in one thing or another. I went somewhere next door, boom. I was in the classroom in less than 2 weeks. Okay, so Osceola County, while we're arguing about whether or not we're doing exit interviews on the people who leave and they're pissed about leaving because they don't like the district or they didn't like the environment or whatever, we can't even get a straight answer on whether or not we're doing a exit interview But in Polk County, one county over, right, I'm in the classroom within 2 weeks of applying, right? And it depended on me. It was on me. I could have done it faster, right? So that says something right there. And remember when that guy came to the Osceola County School Board meeting and he said, "Hey, I have a Juris Doctor, and I also have a master's in science and engineering or chemical engineering, and and I'm the super smart guy, and my kid goes to your schools, and I apply to teach." I never heard back. And so that's one of the things that Polk County was talking about. The two of the people who were teaching the class were from Polk County, coincidentally. And they were saying that we want people to remember. We want them to know that we remember them. So when they come into the pipeline, everybody in that office, in that HR scenario, they remember the names of the people and what they applied for. So when somebody calls, they can immediately say, "Hey, we're just here. We know you're a class. You're looking for a math class. We got you. We're looking for a spot for you." Whatever it is. And that was really impressive that they were acting. And you could just tell these are a whole different level of people than we have. And not everybody. I only know the top level of the HR people. And so that's what I'm referring to, leadership. When I talk about leadership. When you're a leader, when you get paid six figures to do a job, then I'm going to have expectations of you. And I should be able to tell you when you're doing something wrong. That's the responsibility of being a leader, right? And so when I talk about our district, I'm talking about the leaders of the district, people who get paid six figures to do a job, and when they fail at that job, somebody needs to come and say that, because our superintendent doesn't, right? The advantage today in her class, this is really an offshoot, but she was like, "Oh, I've been in Osceola County for 59 years or whatever, and I was born and raised there." And yeah, but that's not good for us. That's not good for Osceola County, and I'll tell you why it's not good for Osceola County. Because the people who get the jobs here are the people that you went to high school with. Well, so what does that mean? We're not getting the best and the brightest, you know? I was born and raised in San Francisco. God forbid I would never live there again in my life, right? They can't even keep people from urinating off the street. But, if I were raised here in Osceola County, I would have a whole different environment. My life in Osceola County would be easier, right? But here's the thing. Let's say that I'm a genius. I'm not talking about myself, but let's just say, for example, Mark, is a genius, and Mark is the world's greatest accountant in the world, right? But what are you going to do? Instead of hiring Mark, you're going to hire Bob. And Bob graduated with your older brother, and that's why you're going to give them the job, because you can trust Bob, and Bob will never make you look bad because he'll never tell the truth. He's just going to say whatever backs you up. And that's the problem. That's government in a nutshell. That's the problem with all government everywhere, specifically in Osceola County, where it's like the Dukes of Hazzard, right? Where that's the problem that you have. You don't hire, instead of hiring the best, instead of, what makes things better? Competition, right? Competition makes everything better. But we don't have real competition. People are just getting hired based on their relationships, and those relationships are basically, if I can trust you to not make me look bad, not because I shouldn't look bad, but because I know that you're never going to drop the dime on me, you're not going to tell on me for what I'm doing, then that does not create an environment of excellence, and that's maybe one place where you should have an environment of excellence. Okay, so that class was great, by the way. One of the teachers of that class, one of the teachers or the presenters, it's really a presenter of that session, is a principal at one of the schools in Polk County. They have not had a vacant position in 6 years, okay? The principal of a high school, okay, where they have 3,000 students, has not had a vacancy in 6 years. That guy is good at his job, right? That guy is good at his job, because no matter what mistakes everybody else makes, in the end, he's got a process which really makes sure that everything is good. So there you go. All right. Whew. Okay, so let me see some other things that they talked about. I want to talk about the legislature. What can we expect for the legislature in terms of education this year? I think that's really important. Recruitment and retention notes here. I got some notes. I took notes like crazy. Okay. Okay, so that's that policy retention. Okay, well, let's see if we're here with the governor about DeSantis and so on. Okay, this is a real complex problem. Okay, the state legislature. What can we expect from the state legislature? Okay, I just wanted to make sure that I wasn't forgetting anything about anything else. State legislature is a real tricky issue. Okay, and I'm going to tell you why. We see all this money, this surplus that Florida has, which is perfect for Florida to have a very large surplus. Why? Because we have storms and hurricanes, and sometimes you need that surplus, and that allows us to build bridges in 3 days the way that the governor was able to do in South Florida. And here's the problem with asking the legislature to fix our educational problems. Number one, education is supposed to be a local product, right? And a local product is supposed to be education. So if anything, there's an argument, there's a discussion that should be taking place between more control over the budget locally versus more control over the budget in the state, in Tallahassee, right? And this Tallahassee does not like to give money to the local districts and say you can do whatever you want with this money. And thank God they do, because if it was Osceola, they would just write a $2 billion check to the lobbyist organization and turn everything over, because that's what in the end happens, right? Osceola County has more special interest than I can even imagine. It's just crazy the amount of money that we are paying because a lobbyist comes and asks for it, and then we immediately write a check for it, right? So that's what happened with that $800,000 organization, I imagine. You know, the tutoring contract and stuff that we can't even get. And when you come and you ask for compliance on contracts, everybody's going to be like, no, don't do that. God forbid. We have to look and see what the results of our contracts and what the return on the investment of that the citizens have made. So, you know, I mean, it's a tough situation. It's a tough walk. Okay. So here's a real tricky situation. We're talking about Tallahassee. We're talking about them solving our problems, okay? And they're talking about, of course, the state wants to deal with the issue of teacher retention and recruitment because it's a problem statewide. So they want to address it. And that's what school board members are coming and talking about, right? So if we go and we ask Tallahassee for billions of dollars, it's going to inflate the money that the school districts make when we're not even spending all the money that we are taking from the state government in a way that could be considered good use or being good stewards of the money. Osceola, for example. Osceola County has millions, more than $100 million in a bank account, okay? Now, the state tells us that we have to have X percentage saved away, right? Osceola County, because we're very responsible in that sense, they have more than that. So let's say that the state tells you 3%, we have 6%, that's responsible, right? Let's say that we're ultra responsible, we're the best ever, we're super healthy, we're doing the right thing, all of our kids, all of our schools are A schools, and so on. So let's do 7 or 8% instead, right? But Osceola is sitting on a fund of 11% or something like that or more, who knows, whatever. So what's the problem with that? First of all, when you have a 10%, right? When you have 10% left over in a bank account, you don't need all the money that you're receiving from the state, right? That's what that tells you, right? You didn't spend all the money that you received. So this money is not money that's free. It's not falling from the sky. This is money out of the pockets of the citizens. The citizens are paying for this. So if you're not spending the money that you're getting, then why are you asking us right now? They're trying to raise that 1% tax. Right? They keep calling it a penny tax. It's not a penny tax. It's a 1% tax. They asked to raise it for 20 years. 20 years, 1%. They're not even spending the money now, right? Our teachers are starving. They're begging for money, and we can't even use that money to pay them, according to the district, right? So that's a problem. So here we have all these problems. The problem is not always solved by money. Sometimes problems can be solved by intelligence faster than it can be solved with money. And there's no intelligence going into Osceola County in the way that they spend the money. There's a lot of intelligence. I'm going to give credit to the CFO here. There's a lot of intelligence in how we save money. There's not a lot of intelligence in the way we spend money. And that's to the detriment of the board. The board is the reason that there's not a good, and it's to their detriment, and it's to the detriment of our students. It's to the detriment of the district on a whole. The school board does not have a good plan for spending money because we have no control over the superintendent. The superintendent controls the school board. It's not the other way around. What happened when I came onto the school board and I start challenging the superintendent and what she's doing? She gets rid of everyone. She goes and she puts her cousin on the board. Now I know it wasn't the superintendent who put her cousin on the board, but essentially, if you in your mind, if you can convince yourself that she was not part of the reason that that person got elected to the school board, her first cousin by marriage, I don't know. If you don't think that they had a conversation about that, if I were, let's say that I was the superintendent myself, right? And let's say that I don't like being challenged on what I'm doing. I don't like to be told I'm not doing a great job. I prefer when everybody voted 5-0 on everything, when the meetings were 20 minutes long, and they said, you're the best superintendent in the world, and then we went home, right? So every 2 weeks we come to the meeting. We're like, hey, you're the best superintendent in the world. Congratulations. We vote yes on everything. Ayes have it, 5-0, everything. Boom, let's go home. We all have dinner day after that, right? Which was the case, actually. So, and then now all of a sudden this guy Arguello comes along and he's telling me I'm not the best and I don't like it. Well, then all of a sudden they get involved in these races. More than $500,000 are spent on these school board races, right? And so that doesn't happen, right, when things are fair. It happens because people are fighting over it, right? They don't like to be exposed for the mistakes that they make. That's something that happens throughout the state. Throughout the state, we're learning that people are like, they don't like to be messed with when they have control, right? Nobody likes to be questioned. So I'm one of the rare birds that I actually like, go ahead and challenge me. Like somebody sent me a tweet today. I tweeted something or whatever, something silly, and they responded back and they said, oh, what a great example for the kids you are. You need one of your kids to teach you how to write a sentence. I was like, well, if you're familiar with Osceola County, it's probably not one of our kids that you want writing my sentences because our schools are not performing that well, right? So, but in the end, and I say that jokingly, but at the same time, I'm not saying it to disparage our kids or our teachers. I'm saying it to disparage our school board and our superintendent. You cannot call yourself the greatest superintendent in the world or the greatest school board member in the world if your school district is not performing well. I mean, I don't understand why we get credit for we're the best. Apparently we're the best. We're the best. And the Chamber of Commerce, the fake Chamber of Commerce of Osceola County comes and they just won an award for the greatest chamber ever, right? So if that Chamber of Commerce, I don't know if they're good or not, but let's say that the Chamber of Commerce, they have 100 businesses that are members and 99 of them close their businesses. Do they deserve the award for Chamber of the Year? Heck no. Of course not, right? So now we are like, we're school board, our superintendent's the greatest ever who ever lived. Teresa Castillo literally said today during their class, I'm going to jump to that in a minute, but she said in the class that she believed that Dr. Pace was the best superintendent in the country. And then she said it over and over again, like to make sure that they emphasized that she was being serious, not joking. When first of all, when what you're saying is not a joke, you don't have to repeat it, right? Okay. So anyways, that's the problem with going with the state. Money is not the answer to every problem, right? So let the state do their job. I guess the state's going to be writing, addressing things like instructional materials, right? They're going to be addressing CTE funding, which is career and technical, right? They're going to be addressing school choice issues. Now, school choice expansion, I'm all for it, but it's an issue that we are, it gets very tricky. I'm going to talk about this a little bit. Corruption, right? Basically, there's like, you have to be very careful when you're privatizing the school industries. You have to be making sure that what you're doing is good for the people. And then if people benefit from that, I don't care. As long as the kids are being taught how to read and write well and they're performing well, I don't care who benefits. Let the whole world benefit. If we were to privatize the school industry and it was one owner and one guy, let's say he became Elon Musk because he controlled all the schools, but every single one of our kids got a 1600 on their SATs when they graduated high school, I'd be like, great. As long as he didn't own the SAT company, fantastic. Let him. I don't care because our kids are getting the benefit. That's worth paying for, right? When you get a new Mercedes S500 or S600, right, and it's like the greatest car in the world, but you pay $150,000 or $200,000 for it, well, it makes sense, right? But if you had to pay $200,000 for a Honda Civic, you're paying a little bit too much. And so that's the problem is that, when you're not careful with the processes that you make in terms of policy, you can find yourself in that situation. Osceola County, we have a similar budget to Seminole County, but we are way underperforming Seminole County in terms of performance. So right now, if you were a taxpayer and you had, which we all are, right, and you had the opportunity to either live in Seminole or live in Osceola just based on the schools, where would you live? And so why? Because the budget's the same, the student number, population is the same. I think our budget is actually higher than Seminole. We get more money than Seminole County. So it's something to think about. What else I got here? Okay, so last night, I'm going to talk about local stuff next. Last night, I spoke at an MBE dinner, which is a Minority Business Enterprise dinner, right? And I know I'm the Republican. I'm on a board of liberals, but I'm the Republican, and here I am talking about MBE. And let me tell you why I support MBE. So I've told this story many times, right? And I talk about my parents all the time, and I told this story last night when I was delivering my speech. My parents in Nicaragua, which is where they're both from, right? They would have never been allowed to meet if they were in Nicaragua and they had stayed in Nicaragua. They would have never met. They would have never had had the opportunity to create the miracle, which is me, right? And to a lesser extent, my two sisters, much lesser extent, my two sisters. But anyways, in all seriousness, they would have never met. In Nicaragua, they would not have met because they were coming from two different classes in Nicaragua. They both immigrated to the United States at different times, and then they were put into a room at the same time, with sufficient frequency to end up falling in love, getting married, being together, and raising a family, right, of Americans. And the interesting thing about that is that for me, MBE is exactly that, right? It's putting people in a room together that may not share the same history and whatever, but they can come together and then create progress for the community, the families of the community, and the country. And I'll tell you why. Orange County, I didn't know this, but I found out last night. Orange County, the demographics of Orange are the following. It's about higher than 40% Hispanic. It was 20-something percent black and 25% white. And I didn't know that, right? Wow, that's crazy. They have an MBE program. It's very successful and so on. Osceola County is a minority majority county. It's almost 70% minority. And we do not have an MBE program. And when I brought MBE up, here's why. The number one indicator for success in education, it's not the only indicator, but the number one indicator, the highest indicator, of student success, of student performance, is economic. It are the economic factors. So people who are not starving perform better in school. That's the bottom line. So I don't know about you guys, but me, I don't want to live in a neighborhood where I'm rich and everyone else is poor. I wouldn't want that. Number one, I'm not a rich person, right? If anything, I'm the poor guy in that respect. But I don't want to be in a neighborhood full of poor people. I don't care if they're all white. I don't care if they're all black. I don't care if they're all from Nicaragua. I don't care if they're all Hispanic or Chinese or whatever. I don't care. I don't want to live in a neighborhood full of poor people, only because I know that they don't have the resources to improve their community, right? It's obvious. It has nothing to do with racism or classism or nothing, right? I'd rather be the poor guy in a rich neighborhood, right? And the reason is why? Because I know that those schools are going to be good, So here's the thing: if you can make people around you surround you, if you can, raising the water levels and makes all boats go higher, right? The saying, rising tide floats all boats. That's kind of like what an MBE does. So because we have a 70% minority county, why wouldn't we be trying to make all those people as prosperous as possible? It's why I'm saying that all of our $2 billion of our school board, they should be staying local. It should be staying local. Everybody in Osceola County, if we're going to spend $2 billion of school board, it should be like all the businesses in Osceola County. But if you were to make a dartboard, right, and the school district is at the center, or let's say our district leadership is at the center, or the oligarchy, I'm going to say this, the oligarchy as I call it, right? The Osceola oligarchy is at the center of that bullseye. The closer you are to that oligarchy, the more money you're going to make, the more points where your dart goes is worth. And that to me is not good, because Most of the people live outside of that bullseye area, and that means they're going to be broke. And you can maybe insulate yourself, but that's not good for the community and the county as a whole. It's not good for our schools. It's not good for anything, right? And when it comes down to it, everybody pays the price. So for me, all that money from a school district should be spent locally. It should be spent where it's helping the most number of people, where it's helping everybody. And I'm not talking about taking away. Competition makes everything better, right? Competition is positive. So, but if you have, let's say that you only have two teams in a league, and one team is like Tom Brady's world champions, and then the other guys are like John Arguello's Bad News Bears. Well, I mean, that's not a lot of competition. And that's what they have right now. Right now, the oligarchy is all the Tom Brady's, right? And they get all the money. And it's not because they're the best in the world like Tom Brady is. It's because they're real close to that center. They're the oligarchy, so they serve themselves, right, until they're engorged. Everybody else is starving. And that's why our schools are having trouble, because we're not congealing like a really strong community should be. So that's my opinion, right? And so when I brought the MBE programs to Osceola County, and then when I brought the veterans, I said, veterans, here's what I did. I said, veterans, bring local, bring small, and bring minority business programs, so that everybody can come here and start a company here in Osceola County, and you can mow the lawns, you can do the drywall, you can install fountains, you can do all this stuff. And we're using local people to do that stuff, especially when the economy is not doing great, when inflation is through the roof at almost 10%, then, we're helping, right? We're feeding ourselves. We're fueling our own community to do well. And of course, they said no. They said no. We fought about it. We fought for a long time. Then eventually they said yes to veterans. They said yes to local. They said yes to small. They said no to minority. 70% of the county is minority. It doesn't make any sense. It's just from a business perspective, it's not wise, and it's not smart, and it's not foreseeable future, because even if you're rich and your child's performing well, he's going to be surrounded by who? Right? Who's he going to be surrounded by? What we want to do is make our county, we don't want to be sending money to Miami for this kind of stuff. We spent almost $1 million to a tutoring company in Miami. We had one in St. Cloud. We have a family in St. Cloud that owns a tutoring company. They hopped over that family, and then they sent that money to a family in Miami instead. How does that make sense? It doesn't. It doesn't make sense. You cannot make it make sense. And then they refused to find out whether or not they actually did the work that they said they were going to do. So it's incredible. I just, when the number one indicator of success in schools, it has to do with finances, then you have to find a way to improve the finances of your county. And we don't have an Osceola County commissioners who care about the financial well-being of our county, right? If the county did a great job at bringing jobs here that were of high value, and if they were doing their job, maybe it wouldn't matter, right? But since they're not doing their job, the school board members are not doing their job, nobody's doing their job, and the only people who are getting rich are them. So, I mean, that's a problem, right? They're only serving their friends and their families, and who knows, some trust fund somewhere where they're protected in the long run. But the kids who are going to school with your kids are suffering, and that's the problem. Okay, let me talk about local stuff a little while. That's local, but okay. This class that Teresa and Dr. Pace, Superintendent Pace, made. Aside from saying that she was the best super in the country, so when Teresa, so I'm listening intently, right? Because they were talking. I'm going to read the course name to you. So the course name, if I could find it. This is pretty, man, there were so many classes that at least had great names that I wish I could have gone to. There was the perils of posting tips before retweeting social media or something or other. I should have gone to that one, but I probably would have failed that class. Okay, so improving student outcomes. This is the name of the class. Improving student outcomes through parent, family, and community engagement. Okay? Improving student outcomes is the first three words. They did not mention those three words in their entire presentation. Okay? I recorded it, so you can challenge me, and I will play the recording, and we can look at it. And I recorded it not to catch them saying those three words or anything, but because Terry said our superintendent was the best in the country. And then I knew nothing but BS was going to come out of it. And I was like, oh, God, I got to record this. So I pulled my phone out and I recorded it because I just couldn't believe. What metric? What metric are we using? I mean, it's time that we start backing up the things that we say, right? What metric are we using to say that we have the best superintendent in the country when we have we're at the bottom of the list in the state for performance? So how can we say she's the best in the country? I wouldn't say that. And that's not a knock against Pace. That's a knock against our school district. We cannot be getting awards and saying that we're the best. As long as all of our schools are not A's, our work is not done. So don't brag about what our district is, because we may have the best kids in the world, and if we do, we're failing them. If we have the worst kids in the world, we're still failing them. We are failing our kids because we can't even measure how well they're doing because we're not doing well enough. So that's the problem. And it's just ridiculous that they would be teaching a class on improving student outcomes, not mention student outcomes, and then not talk about any of the things. What they did is they talked about what a great job they were doing with outreach, but they didn't talk about student outcomes. And I went there because of those first three words, student outcomes. And so, I mean, student outcomes is the only thing that we should be concerned about. The only reason that they were talking about it was because it was at the last year's FSBA, and student outcomes was an important word, right? Like the main speaker, the keynote speaker was talking about student outcomes and how student outcomes impact. Well, they didn't touch on that. So they missed the whole point. You know, they missed the entire point of its purpose. Okay, so let me talk a little bit about my fears coming up. And then we're going to wrap up with the show here. I think we're pretty much done. Okay, so let me wrap up really quick. I'm really worried about the process. Now, we have a whole bunch of more conservatives on school boards. That's a positive in my opinion, because now you have balance. But now we're like surrendering some of the power to the state. And so here's the thing. A lot of school board members came and they were talking about different things and discussions and whatever, and they were surrendering their ideas. They were surrendering some of their independence, some of their homegrown ideas to Tallahassee. To me, that's a danger. I don't want Tallahassee running the schools in Osceola County. I want Osceola running Osceola County schools. I don't want an oligarchy running our schools. I want the community to run our schools. And that's a huge difference. To me, that's very important. But I also don't want to surrender our local control to Tallahassee, right? So here's the thing. Could Osceola County use more money? Yes. If Osceola County were given another $1 billion, would it improve the outcomes for students? In my opinion, under this current leadership, it would not. Because the money that we spend is not for that. So it's just a real tough situation for us. Until we know why our kids are not doing better and not make excuses for our performance, then we should not be getting any more money, right? And certainly money from Tallahassee does not come without strings. So that's what I'm thinking. I'm going to promote now. I'm going to take a moment to say again, I believe that our teachers in Osceola County should be paid a beginning salary of $70,000. And for every year of service, they should be paid $1,000 more. So for example, right? Well, let me go there. Let me say that that's unrealistic. And it's unrealistic not because the state legislature or we can't find a way to do it legally, any of that. It's unrealistic because people don't want to do it. And if there's not the will, then it'll never happen. But I will say this. What we could do, right, is we have the starting salary of $47,500. I think that's what it is, $47,500 for the state, right? And so, in my opinion, every teacher should be elevated to that statement. So it doesn't matter when you started. When they raise that minimum salary, let's say now to $47,500, everyone should go to $47,500. Now, add what amount of raises you have had over the past. So to make it easy, let's say that you have been with the school district for 11 years, put $1,000 for every one of those 11 years. Now you're making $47,500 plus the 11. Now you can't get steps, right? And it doesn't go towards your retirement when it's a supplement like that, right? When it's some kind of exterior, you have to use a special word, so it doesn't count as a bonus because you can't use that word, state statute or whatever. But at least it's a fair way, because one of the issues our teachers are having is that they'll come into our school districts, they'll begin teaching, and then somebody comes in, a brand new teacher in 5 years, and they're making more money than they are, right? Because the starting salary went up. So that's a problem that needs to be resolved. And let me tell you why I think that teacher pay is a big deal. I've had some conservatives come to me and say, "Oh, teachers, they're all indoctrinators and they're all doing this and they don't deserve the money." Okay, not every single teacher in the state of Florida is a great teacher, right? Not every single accountant in an accounting firm is the best accountant, right? Okay, that's fine. That's fine and good. Some teachers don't have the best intentions, and the vast majority do. But it doesn't matter. When you're the boss of a workplace, it doesn't matter how much they love that job. It's your job as a leader to get the most out of that employee, all right? And I know that there's people who are bosses here, and they'll understand that right away who watch, right? If you're a boss of a location, it's your job to get the most out of that employee and make sure that that employee is giving his all every day, right? Not everyone cares about the company. Not everyone cares about the result. Not everyone cares about sales. Not everyone cares about the details. Some people are just there so that they can go do their hobby on the weekend, or they can go back home and feed their families, and that's all they care about. That's their priority, and that's okay. And but here's the thing: when you're a boss, your policies drive the environment, which provide people with a place where they feel comfortable to work and people don't want to leave. Now, for a long time, that's been education, because people had these expectations of what education was going to be like. That's changed. The environment has been torn to shreds because the system of education in our country and in our state and everywhere has become obsolete. It has outgrown itself. We've had the same thing for 200 years. It's time to change. We need real creative people to come into the system. We need the best of the best to come in. And the way that you bring them in is by offering more money, by offering an environment where they can use their talents, and by being an inspiring boss who listens to people. In fact, that principal who has not had a vacancy in 6 years, he was saying that his teachers are part of his decision-making process. They have a voice, right? Now in Osceola County, where it's a very top-down structure and teachers don't have a voice in how it's run, right? It's top-down. It's like it's a dictatorship, right? Like the superintendent says it and everybody does it and that's it, and you got cups and you did this and whatever, blah, 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 blah. And but they don't feel like they're part of the decision-making process. In fact, we have teachers that are constantly complaining about retaliation if they ever say anything, either from their admin or from the district or from somebody. And we know that that's true. We know that happens in Osceola County. I know for a fact that it happens in Osceola County. It happened to me as a school board member for opening my mouth. So I opened my mouth and I said, maybe you're not the best in the world. And all of a sudden, somebody threatens me at at a dinner telling me I'm going to unleash the PR system against you. And then they did, right? And I have some other guy who sends all these commission complaints on me every month, And so, even I'm getting retaliated against. So what about a teacher? A teacher who has no name ID, she's not politically connected, she can't raise $50,000, she can't do all this stuff. And what about that teacher, right? Who they're just trying to feed their families, and they can barely have the opportunity to do that as a teacher. And they're not going to get retaliated against? Of course they are, right? And we have the kind of vindictive, retaliatory environment where that happens all the time. And that's one of the problems with having your high school buddy, your sorority sister as your, chief, whatever, because that creates that in a situation where you're all friends. But I'm not one of your friends. I'm just the teacher, and, or I'm just so-and-so, and I'm just trying to make my career, but I can't do it because everybody, if you're not part of the oligarchy, then you don't get anywhere. And so that creates a huge problem. Listen, I appreciate you guys watching. I appreciate you guys sticking with me. I think I have decided, and I'm going to end with this, I have decided to run for re-election. So I'm saying that now. I am going to run for school board again. I know I don't run until 2024, but I want all the issues to come out now. All right. And so I already expect if they spent $500,000 winning these other 3 seats that they just won, I'm sure that they're going to spend the same amount of money against me. I'm probably their least favorite person. They don't want me to be exposing what's going on at the Osceola County School District. They want to go back to 30-minute meetings and 5 yeses, and that we have the greatest in the world. We're doing the greatest in the world, even if our kids don't know how to read. And I'm never going to do that for them. So it's going to be a huge challenge, but I'm going to fight like hell, just like I would for my country and for my family and for my community on anything else. And I'm going to do the best that I can. I'm going to continue serving you with dignity and as much honor as I can, and making sure that I'm speaking for the people that I can represent throughout Osceola County. And I'm depending on your support. So thank you very much. I appreciate you for watching. God bless you. Have a very good evening. And I look forward to connecting with you again through social media and any other way. My phone number is 407-569-7111. Feel free to call me for any reason. And please share and like and follow and do all the things that you need to do. And and if you would, please follow me on Twitter. I don't know if you guys are back on Twitter, the people who left Twitter, but please follow me on Twitter and connect with me. Thank you, and God bless. Have a great night.